So I'm 100% positive that I'm not alone when I say that about once a month I become disillusioned and wonder what I'm doing and kind of want to quit. I become exhausted. I think to myself, you know, nothing is changing. It's really only getting worse, right? And I suspect that most of us are actually feeling this way even more these days. So we continue to ask ourselves, but seriously, what has changed in a positive way? And just by the way, I do appreciate the cautious optimist speakers from this morning. I do consider myself in that category as well. So no, I'm not here today to talk about measurement or monitoring and evaluation or learning around our progress, which is something I'm certainly responsible for as the Director of Strategy and Learning at the Engine Room. But I am here to talk about how we, instead of giving up or reverting to sort of technical evaluation processes that may just make us feel better, we can become better at targeting our energy toward what matters. So specifically, I want to talk about analyzing and shifting power. And again, I think I'm excited to talk about this because all of the speakers have kind of alluded to it or explicitly called it out. But I mean, I'm really not here, no, I don't really want to talk about power in the way that we seem to continue to be talking about power, right? So, which is to say, power matters, let's take note of it, or, you know, power in politics, let's track it, let's map it. And then we see it, the power imbalances, or unjust politics, and we develop a program or a policy to mitigate it. Instead, I want to focus on how, while we continue to try to reduce power imbalances through technology and policy-related solutions, we overlook two main things, and we do this at a cost. So number one, we overlook the agency or the human capacity to act that continues on in the same way, even with the technical and technocratic tools in place. Number two, intellectually or in theory, we know that power is networked and multifaceted, but we design solutions as if power is static or wielded only by those who are obviously influential. So ultimately, as we keep working in these ways, we at best see positive change that is small, or at worst, incremental progress turns into incremental backsliding. So today I'm just going to offer two examples of how we are working differently to try and account for these common oversights. I've spent the last many years working with the open government community across the world. And it all started from developing the Open Government Platform networking mechanism, the OGP networking mechanism, which was meant to matchmake between civil society organizations and governments from around the world. And then last year, I spent most of my year kind of embedded in a few different contexts, working with the subnational OGP pilots in co-creating their action plans. And then most recently, I was working with partners from this region, co-creating a set of guidelines. There was folks from government and civil society, basically to align on a set of shared challenges from this region and develop recommended processes for tackling them. So the result of this last piece of work is a digital resource that you all will be working to expand on with me tomorrow in a workshop. So there's actually a process that I'll lead us through that will help us expand the content that's already built out by some of your peers from the region. So the process that we went through to develop this first set of guidelines led us to basically 3 shared open government challenges. The first being whitewashing, the second being a lack of civic duty, and the third, these should resonate, products that are developed but not actually used. So say an open data portal, for instance, that's not actually used. During my time in Belgrade last month with your peers, who are also the authors of these guidelines, we noticed that guidelines exist typically in the form of technocratic formulas to programming and policy making. So we determined it important then to develop content that was different in 3 ways. So number 1, we focused, as I said, on shared challenges, which was quite different than, say, expert thematic areas, access to information, open data, etc. It was an organizing principle that most people working on these issues can get behind, can easily understand, and that really resonates. So number 2, we focused on a word that's come up a few times this morning, which is processes. The workflow that an individual can follow instead of, say, a static, expert-driven list of resources. So a workflow for us is the actual way in which people think and act, and it essentially was a simulation of a problem-solving journey. And finally, we developed an entire section of each of the workflows in these guidelines, which you can see tomorrow, entirely on the who. So the actual open government influencers that would use this, and specifically on human competencies that one can build to effectively tackle these challenges. So that's kind of the first example of how we started to think about power, but also really start to design around it. As I was saying earlier, power, as you know, is not unidirectional. It's not dominant over dominated, or government over citizen. Again, we know this, but in practice, we often default to the oppressed and oppressor binaries that are reductive and forget to account for the heterogeneity within institutions and also the complex nature of individuals. So power is, of course, complicatedly networked and morphing into shapes and sizes all the time. Given this, our question of where does power lie is a question that falls quite short of what we need. Rather, we can ask, how does power move in predictable and unpredictable ways, and why? And this gets us closer to examining what we actually need to. At the Engine Room, we are currently working with partners in Latin America and experimenting in Southern Africa to see how influence and the abuse of influence can be better understood. From a technical angle, you might call what we're doing data-driven mapping of politically exposed persons, or PEPs. In our mind, however, the approach we are designing or trying to design is one that doesn't statically map power, but that explores ways that we can investigate the intricate movements of influence. So in the end, we want to develop a blueprint for agilely looking at a power metamorphosis. We'll be working on this through the end of the year and really hope to keep you updated on our progress. So in conclusion, I invite you guys to join our journey, but also your own journey, where we take a hard look at the technical and technocratic solutions we are creating, and one, ensure that we are developing them in close relation to the human behaviors that influence them. And two, we don't stop at shining the light on power imbalances and abuses, but we rather develop a black light that illuminates hidden and unexpected movement. Taking these approaches, I am hopeful and in fact probably confident that we won't have to doubt our contributions to positive social change. Thank you.